And there we go. Hello, thanks for joining us tonight for our final Defending the Early Years book talk. My name is Denisha Jones, and I serve as the executive director of Defending the Early Years. And we launched the book talks this year, starting in January. I am so proud. This is our what month is this? Sixth. So this is our sixth book talk. I think I managed to do one a month. I kept resisting on saying that at first because I didn't think it was going to work out that way, but it did because we did two in the month of June and we didn't do any in the month of May. Um, but we did two in the month of June because we have been highlighting the Black Lives Matter at School Year of Purpose guiding principles, and the June principle is Black women. So we featured two books authored, written, or about Black women. And so tonight is our final one, and I'm very excited for our discussion. So I have the pleasure of introducing Alissa Mwenelupembe. Did I get that right? Almost. All right. Has worked in early childhood education for over 20 years and has a long history with NAEYC as a member, volunteer, author, and past student governing board member. She has served as a classroom educator, quality coach, trainer, and childcare director. She currently serves as the chief early learning quality and research officer. Alissa holds a doctorate in early childhood education from Ball State University, and her research focuses on the lived experiences of Black women in early childhood education and leadership. So, welcome, Melissa, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Denisha. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and I also, Alyssa was a guest on the DY podcast. I was sharing some old episodes, and I was like, "Ooh, I think we did a two-part with you." So,
Mhm.
yeah, that was great. I'll add the links when I share out this recording so people can go back and listen to those episodes as well too.
Great.
All right. So for the rest of you guys joining us, we are recording this, so you're welcome to keep your camera on or off. Just stay muted until we get to the question and answer portion. Um, and let's see, we will have time for Q&A. So if you have a question, feel free. Oh, people are just jumping in, so I'm gonna stop because I'm gonna have to redo this whole thing. But let me pin you, and then I'll pin myself while I'm letting people in. And that will, all right, there we go. All right, we got a few people in. All right, welcome. For those of you who are just joining us, we're about to get started on tonight's book talk. Just a couple logistical things. We are recording, so please keep your camera, your phone muted. You can keep your camera off or on, it's up to you. We will have time for Q&A at the end, so if you have any questions for Alyssa, you can put them in the chat. Or, because we're a relatively smaller group, at the end, you can raise your hand and come off mute and ask your question as well, too, if you prefer it that way. And we are recording this, so we will send out the recording to everyone who registered as well too, and share it on our Facebook page. Okay, and then I have to do it this way. Sorry, I think my hold on, my background's blurred. I like to show the book, but I
I have
only
mine.
okay. If you want to show yours, great, because I only have my Kindle copy of your book, so I'm like I really do have it, people, but I waited for a long time to buy it. Where's the cover? And I had to get it on Kindle, and I was like, it's really hard to show a book on Kindle,
I just
but
pressed
there
that
it
it's on
is.
Kindle. I didn't even know it was.
Oh yeah, yeah, I totally got it that way because I've been out of the country and so I can't get books all the time in person delivered on time, right? I don't have that Amazon Prime luxury. So let's start with talking about your book. Sorry, that's why I was going in there. Stories of Resistance: Learning from Black Women in Early Care and Education. And it says it's collected. So you didn't write all of the chapters, right? You start us off and you but tell us a little bit about what made you write this book and what can people find inside of it?
Yeah, so definitely this is a collection of stories, and the road to getting here was interesting. I had been working with Exchange Press in a variety of ways for many years, and had an idea that I wanted to write a book. They agreed that it would be great if I wrote a book, and I tried to write a book, and I got that thing that you probably have gotten in your life too, Denisha, where like,
Mhm.
who am I? I can't write a book. What am I going to say?
Exactly.
Nobody cares about what I have to say. And so I was actually at an AC conference back when I was on the board, and I tell this story in the book actually. And I was sitting with my very dear friend and also contributor Kelly Ramsey, and we were just kind of talking about like how did we get to this place? I was on the board, Kelly was leading an organization, she was training, and it was never on any of our bingo cards that we would be in this place in this profession at this time. And we just started talking about stories, and it all came together for me of, you know what, I don't actually have to write a book myself. There are all these amazing women that I have encountered over the years that have these stories that are unique and thoughtful and powerful. And what if we brought all of those stories together? And luckily, Exchange Press jumped right on board. They were really excited by the idea. And so I started working on it, and it worked out really nicely because then it turned into the beginnings of my dissertation. So all these things were
Awesome.
able to work together. And I have to call out my dissertation chair is in the room with us. So she's very
Nice.
intimately engaged with these stories, Dr. Taylor.
Okay. Okay. And you've already defended, right? You already
Yes.
finished that. So that
Yes,
was
all
great.
done.
So most people, Alyssa, we do it the other way. We do a dissertation and then we write a book. I
Right.
love this. I don't know anyone. Wait, wait, wait. I don't know anyone who's done it this way. Actually, I do. I knew one guy, right? We were doing some work around school reform or whatever, and I met this guy from New York, Sam something, and he wrote this book. Do you know they gave him a PhD because of the book? And I said, it only happens to white men. I don't know anyone else that happens to. I mean, he did take a few classes, right? But he's a history guy. So
Wow.
his book had so much history and data that they were able to let that stand as his dissertation. So you're the only other person I know who started with a book and then
Well,
pivoted
I wish
into your
it were that
dissertation.
simple and straightforward because I did have to like do a lot of convincing that
Yes, yeah.
this research was close enough to the time of writing the dissertation that
Okay.
it could count.
Yes, yes, yes.
But, it was a really great opportunity to, have the stories here in the book and they're great, but to be able to take that research lens to it and dig even deeper and understanding the themes that emerge throughout the stories, understanding,
Hmm.
at a deeper level how we were similar and how we were different. For those of us that really are research nerds, it was a
Hmm.
real nerdy experience to be able to take it even deeper than that. So I feel
I
really
love it.
grateful to the contributors who I still talk to often. We've really become a nice like cohesive group, and there's a text chain that pops off every once in a while when somebody's struggling with something or somebody wants to celebrate something. It really became a great community.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you build a community from it. So let's talk about this. This book features 12 Black women, including yourself. Can you share how you identified the women who would be included in the book?
Yeah, so about half of them were folks that I knew,
Okay.
where these were, friends, colleagues, people I had met throughout kind of my journey throughout early
Hmm.
childhood. And so it's like, wow, I think you're great. I think your story is really interesting. You should join this project. The other half, I kind of put out a call to say, like, hey,
Nice.
do you know
Okay.
anybody
Hmm.
that you think has a story that needs to be told? I have this platform. And one of the people that really came in clutch for me was Margie Carter. She actually introduced me to many of the authors. And the one I
Okay.
feel the most grateful for in this book is Theresa, because Theresa is somebody that I would have never met in my life
Hmm.
without
Okay.
this opportunity. And her story just was
Yeah.
so interesting as being the eldest of us in the group and seeing
Okay.
how she both navigated this experience of as a child moving to Alaska and in a time when it was published in the paper that a colored family had moved to the city in Alaska and
Hmm.
really navigating what it felt like to be other in that space of
Hmm.
also people who are other in the greater kind of US context. And then just
Yeah.
like watch her life unfold through the civil rights, through the Vietnam War, through all of these things that, for me, is not a part of my life story. And then to see her still here on the other side and still sharing her
Hmm.
wisdom, I found her to be very inspiring. And also, she was kind of like the grandma of the group that like kept us in line.
I love that. Definitely the grandma. Yeah, I started with her story and yeah, it was very interesting. And I was just like, the connections between the indigenous community that she had
Mhm.
from her mom and how she was able to use that, but then also what they faced, right? And you just don't think of Black people living in Alaska, but they do,
Right.
right? They do.
Right.
And they've been there for a long time and they've been paving the way for civil rights and for other things. So that's a great story to have included. And I wasn't surprised. I mean, I don't feel like I know everybody, but I was like, oh, Rukina. Okay. I think I met Crystal before. I'm sure Megan and I are friends on Facebook. And Alyssa. Okay. I know some of these people. I felt great, because like you're like, do I know any of these people? I don't know. The field is so immense. And, there's a difference between academics, researchers, practitioners, those in, right, and those worlds. And so it was nice to see some familiar names, but also meet to be introduced to some new Black women and doing this work. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I saw somebody called out in the chat that they attended
Hmm.
one of the sessions that we did at a NACE annual conference, and that
Hmm.
has been a really amazing experience as we've done those to typically pull together a standing room only
Mm.
crowd of
Yeah, I'm sure
primarily
you
Black
did.
women
Oh
who are
yeah.
looking for a space for to connect in this huge conference.
Yeah.
And so being able to share our stories in that way, but then also just connecting with people at the end because it's been so fun to see who kind of resonates with whose stories and like how they find that person at the end. And so like
Hmm.
the biracial women find me, and the the queer women find Megan, and the family child care educators find Jolitha. And it's like just really great
Yeah,
for like people to be able to see themselves
of
in these
course.
stories, and then to be able to like have access to us. Like we're just like real normal people who are always happy to talk and share our experience and share, you know, anything that is useful information. I think sometimes, you know, I know this was true for me as I was coming up in early childhood. Like you read the books and you see these people and you're like, oh, like they're like untouchable. And like that's one of the things that I just wanted to be different about this book and about this experience of like I really did want people to see a path for themselves here.
I
And
love that.
that path also includes being able to like connect directly with the people that wrote the stories.
Yeah, yeah, that actually fits in right to my next question because I was thinking about that when I was reading it, right? Like, so we know that Black women and women of color in general make up a majority of the early childhood education teaching force, yet they are absent from teacher education courses and theories of development. I've searched and searched. I've taught theories of child development at 3 universities, and I'm like, there's got to be a way to decolonize this damn class and bring in some other voices and I exposed the whole Maslow stole his theory from the Blackfoot people and the right. And I tried, but there's just not. And when it comes to Black women child development theory, and maybe I'm wrong, please, if you guys know of some that I'm not aware
Mhm.
of, please let me know because I have been desperate for years to bring those voices into the course. And the best I can hope for is an article here, like a one-off article by an African, perspective on child development, which is great, but it's not the same thing because, like you said, we don't revere, right? We're still steeped in the lens of what I call the famous dead white men of early childhood, Piaget, Vygotsky, Erickson, the whole crew, Dewey, all of that, which is fine that, they have the place, but we want people to feel more grounded. Even Montessori, she's the only woman who comes up a lot in some of the theories. There are a couple others around play and moral development might come up, but, those are the main ones. And it's still not enough, right? It's still not enough diversity. So why do you think it's important for others to learn from these Black women, both as like not just like people to be revered and like you said, can't touch, but like ordinary Black women that you can bump into at an AC conference?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this book actually was for and with other Black women. I
Yes.
really thought very little about white people in the
Hmm.
making of this book and
Good.
the talking about this book.
Hmm.
So it's great if white people can get something out of this and see a different perspective. Those are all wonderful things, but
Yeah.
this for me really was about helping Black women see themselves in a
Yes.
field that often overlooks them. So,
Mm.
you know, I've had great groups. I'm sitting on a podcast in a few weeks with two white women that are Canadian, and I'm going to talk
Okay.
about this in the context of their very white Canadian environment. And so,
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
that is important too, but it just hasn't been the frame that I've been working
Yeah.
from
Hmm.
as I decided to create the title, the content, and continue to talk about it. This really is for me about uplifting a group of people that often don't get that attention within the space.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, we talk about theorists, and there's even, I feel like, generations after that that are still kind of pointing in the same direction. It's like, yeah, that's all like the old white guys who are the
Hmm.
theorists, but then I would say there's a really long history of the white women that came after that that are
Hmm.
the more contemporary people that
Hmm.
we
Hmm.
are pointing to and reading about. And so I don't know. I think there's just a moment where we can be different, and it takes
Yeah.
people that look like us to
Yes.
actually put ourselves out there and put our voices and our faces and our thinking out into the world to make sure it exists.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to talk about the title for a minute because it is called Stories of Resistance. And I think that's super important because in this idea of whose voice are you uplifting, right? You could have found 12 or 11 PhD academic Black women, right? They exist, right? But they're not, right? There are people in the field and the working directly. And so I think that speaks to the idea of elevating those stories. That's theory. I can get into a whole nother conversation about that, right? But like there is theory to be learned from those stories as well, too, right? But just getting those stories out there. And so like, talk a little bit about why stories of resistance.
Yeah, I mean, it really does come from like the beginning of all of this, where it started with the Shirley Chisholm quote about bringing the folding chair when you're not offered a seat. And so it's like, how are we, all of us, in life in these stories pushing back against the narratives that are constantly thrown at us. We are all resisting against the, dominant narrative, against the people who are holding us back, against the society that is making decisions that directly impact our lives and oftentimes in very negative ways. Like even for me and for the women in these stories, even just showing up to do the work every day is often an act of resistance. And so
Yes.
it felt like a really powerful word to
Hmm.
use when, especially in a space like early childhood education, where we don't often think of ourselves as powerful, that
Yes.
we actually can be quite powerful. And as Black women who aren't, kind of held up in the same way as our counterparts, like we do have power here. And when we come together, we really can bring that power to life.
Yeah, yeah. I always say that there is a connection between caring for young children and young children lacking power and their teachers also feeling like they have no power or agency. Young
Right.
children having no agency and autonomy and your teachers feel and like we have to recognize that and pull it apart, right? And I think the one way we do that is we empower the children, we give them agency, and then it's a step to reclaiming our own, right? And I think that's important connections that people often don't see. But yeah, I love the idea of storytelling as super important. So each chapter begins with a key word. Please tell us a little bit about what these keywords represent and why they're kind of important to the stories being told.
Yeah, so the great thing about the titles of each of the stories is that the writer of the
Mm.
story chose their own.
Okay.
We went, we had this conversation, the editor and I, about how we wanted to organize the book, and I really felt it was important to give the women who gave of themselves. I mean, these stories are very emotional and
Hmm.
vulnerable. And so
Yeah.
I wanted them to have as much agency in the experience of sharing these very vulnerable stories. And so being able to then say, this is the word that encapsulates like who I am, what my story represents. But that was
Hmm.
a lot of fun for everybody to kind of like talk about what their words were. But thinking about who each of us is as an individual and what was the word that we felt like we like just resonated the most with us, with our experience, and how we wanted people to think about us and about our
Right.
stories as we go out. And that was one of the things that I found the most interesting in my research. And I didn't use all 12 stories in my dissertation research. I only used a
Okay.
subset of them. But
Hmm.
the thing that came out just above and beyond about these stories is that these are stories of strength and not of weakness. And I think
Hmm.
I get frustrated at times when we're having conversations about minorities, about Black women, about Black children, that it's coming from, oh, they are lacking or
Hmm.
it's so
Hmm.
hard for them. And like, yeah, all of us, all of our stories have some sort of a trial or a tribulation that we've gone through, but that's not
Hmm.
actually what the story's about. The story's about
Hmm.
us as individuals being able to say, I get to make decisions about my life. I get to show up in the room even though nobody asked me to be there and raise my voice. We can focus on the areas that aren't going so well, or we can focus on the immense strength that we're all bringing into those conversations. And so, really helping everybody to land on a strong word, on a word that doesn't
Hmm.
diminish all of the brilliance that they're bringing, and, being able to really authentically be themselves. That was one of my other really the most challenging thing about these
Hmm.
stories and the most rewarding was that some of the women in this book had never written before. They
Hmm.
had not written anything. And then what we're asking them to do is not only write their story, and first of all, figure out what your story is, because we all have a million stories. Like, what's the one
Hmm.
you want to tell? So then,
Yeah.
working with them to craft this story that both captures their voice and their essence, but also puts them in the best light possible.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that it doesn't feel like this is your first time ever writing anything. And so
Hmm.
that was it was hard
I bet.
because
Yeah.
because maintaining the voices was so important to me. I
Yeah.
did not want everybody in this book to sound like me. I
Yeah.
wanted
Yeah.
them to be able to for their voice to come through. And I worked really closely with some folks and iterations and versions and over and meeting and talking through of like maybe you can't figure out how to articulate this by writing, but let's talk about it. Let's record a conversation and then I'm going to give back to you what you just gave to me and just trying to find whatever was the best way to capture the story that they wanted to tell and then figure out a way to get it on paper and make it feel cohesive to the rest of the book also.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a monumental task. The one book that I've done is co-edited, and yeah, lots of chapters, lots of different people. Some experienced writers, some not. Fortunately, our editor at Haymarket took on a lot more process than I had to. But it was interesting to see how they worked with people, and they said, "No, we'll work with them directly, and we want to, yeah, because you're telling different people, and you want it, they want the book to be coherent, but you also want it to stand out as this person's telling this."
Right.
And yeah, I use a similar technique. Just, oh, I don't have time to write. Okay, I'll interview you. Let's record it and we'll put the transcript of it. Like, we can do this, people. We can do this. There are ways to get your stories out there, and it's super important. So yeah, I love for the people I know and like reading their word. It's great. It's like I'm like, okay, that's a really nice way to kind of think about the stories and that and what we're getting from them as well too. So, what do you hope people take from this book as readers as they read it and engage with it?
I mean, I always hope that Black women read this and say, oh, wow, I see myself in one of
Okay.
these stories. And
Hmm.
especially for, I think, younger women, I I don't know that I really ever saw anyone that looked like me as I was kind of growing in this
Mm-hmm.
field that had a role that I aspired to be at. It really
Hmm.
wasn't until I started kind of coming into a national space where I got to meet people like Carol Brunson Day and Jerlene
Hmm.
Daniel. And I was like, oh, here you are. I didn't know that
Hmm.
you existed, but here you
Hmm.
are. And so being able to see like, oh, this person started Alissa started as an assistant 2-year-old teacher. I'm an
Hmm.
assistant 2-year-old teacher. Does that mean that maybe this is a path that I can go down? Like, yeah, of course it does. So being able to see that, like, there is a path and people that look like you have done that before, have followed that path in many different ways. I think that,
Yeah.
for young women who are exploring this book, they've got 12 different versions of who they might want to be as an early childhood educator, from a classroom educator to somebody that's working for the national organization to somebody who's doing in higher ed. Like they've got all these different pathways that now they know are open to them and that they could explore. And then I think for everybody else, I just hope that I think the more that we can hear the stories and experiences of people that are different from us, it just opens up our world and it helps us to think differently. I have two teenagers who, it's an experience in itself, but
Yes, I'm there.
um, there's a lot of TikTok happening in my house, and I really had a moment where it's like, I know that there are so many things that are bad about things like TikTok. But what
Hmm.
I think is really good is my children now have all of these experiences from people all over the world
Yeah.
that are sharing their life that looks
Hmm.
very different than theirs. And
Hmm.
they would have never had access to that if it weren't for this online platform. I think that, the world is not so big. Yet we all continue to find ourselves in these very segregated spaces. And so, if the only way for a white kid in the South to be able to see the experience of, a Latino person working in, Chicago is on
Hmm.
TikTok, then I want them to be able to have that experience and to see that person as a whole human being with joy and sadness and frustration and not just probably the narrow view of what that person might be that they have experienced thus far. So, I think that anytime we can just open ourselves and our experiences up in ways that feel safe and comfortable,
Hmm.
with,
Hmm.
I just think that it just helps to try to make our world a little bit like gentler than it is right
Hmm.
now.
Yeah, I was thinking, I mean, you talked about Shirley Chisholm's quote, and it comes up in the book a few times, right? But it also seems like that's how we make space at the table, right? For the chair that we've brought along by sharing our stories, by really giving people a glimpse into a life they would have never seen before. That's how the table gets bigger, right? Because it's like, oh, someone else is at the table. Let's hear their story, and someone else, but you got to get there and you got to show up, right? And so these stories are how these women showed up, how they kept, persevering through whatever, and how they made a way out of no way, which is kind of something we're very familiar with. And so, yeah, I think it's a really nice for people to see that, right? There are so many possibilities, but it's that openness to hear the stories, to engage with them. And we're hearing in the comments how people have been learning from Black women in early childhood and really understanding, right? And I would love to see this in other iterations, other folks also telling their stories about working in early childhood. And I constantly say that we have so much knowledge and education, but we don't feel very knowledgeable, smart. And I'm like, no, but we are, and our experiences matter. And so telling those stories are super important as well, too.
Yeah, I've been really happy to see the response to the book, not just from, like I said, the Black women who
Hmm.
are just kind of soaking it all in and making those connections. But I got an email not long after it was published from Debbie Lee Keenan out of
Oh,
Seattle.
lovely. Yeah.
And Debbie's
Hmm.
like, Alyssa, I want to talk to you about the book because I'd love to do that from an Asian American perspective. And so I'm really excited. Macy is publishing that book in
Yeah. Oh,
November. And
great.
so,
Yeah.
thinking about how do we just grow this?
Yes.
How do we
Yes.
get
I
more
was
stories out into the
More
world?
stories. Yeah, I
So,
would love to see like Latina women and their work in
yeah,
early childhood, and as well Filipino women, other groups that we know who are doing this work, even like certain fields. Like I'd love to hear more from family childcare providers. I think their stories are so important, right? And so how do we diversify Head Start teachers, right? Head Start teachers who started out as Head Start parents, because so many miss that
yeah,
pipeline. I'm like, raise your hand if you started as a Head Start parent and you became, and they're like, hand shoot up. I'm
almost
like, yeah.
all of them.
My mom was so close because I was her Head Start baby on the bus. I was
Oh,
the first one of her kids who took the Head Start bus, but she went into nursing. She had already started nursing in Panama, so she didn't really want to. But I could have seen her, right? If she didn't have that nursing background,
yeah.
ended up in early childhood because a lot of Head Start parents kind of grow that pipeline. And it'd be great, right, to hear those stories as well, too. So I
Yeah,
can't
and
wait
I
to see
think
Debbie's book. That's going to be
yeah, and
wonderful.
so it's available for purchase and it comes out in November. I've actually read it. It's really
Oh,
good.
good, good.
And if you follow Debbie or I think Debbie's the one that's been posting mostly on social media. They have like a
Okay.
little teaser video. It's beautiful.
Okay.
So definitely take a look on social media if you
I think I follow her, but I'll have to go look for it. Some my, social media algorithms be hiding the good stuff from me. Then it's like, do you want to see this? And I just loved it. I'm like, of course I want to see it.
right.
So that's great. No, because that is definitely the kind of thing. And I think for me, I remember when I was doing some work with in early childhood teachers in DC about Black Lives Matter at school, and the director said, "Well, what if parents come to us and they want to do this other?" I said, "Of course, do it, but not during
Not now.
February." Not during the first week of February, which is Black History Month, which we've designed Black Lives Matter at school. But by all means, do another, but another time we want to celebrate. It's not a one-off, right? And so, yeah, there's nothing wrong with having another book, which are stories of Asian American women in early childhood education and stories of this group. Like we want all of those diverse stories. We want more. There's never not enough room, right? I think that's such an important part to this, because people think like to be pro-black is to be excluding others, and I'm like, no, we are not. We are pro everyone, but not having to share the space, right? Not someone saying, oh, why didn't you include other voices? No, 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 no. You can write a book that's 12 Black women, and you don't have to apologize for that. And I think that's also super important. And then you can support your friend Debbie in her work and getting her book out and doing her story. And so that's the kind of modeling I think we want to show, like of what's possible.
Yeah.
So, of the chapters I read, yours really resonated me with the most. So, this is where I struggle sometimes reading, because I read all these stories, about, the first few that I read, and it was like, born in the civil rights era, parents are doing, and I'm always like cringing because it's so
Mhm.
not my story, and I just don't feel like I belong. And then I got to your story, and I was like, okay, and it's different, right? Because my family is, all black, but my mother is Panamanian, as I mentioned, and so we moved to the United States, and she's pretty much raising five children by her own on her own, and it took her a while to assimilate to Black American culture. So I'd say when we were younger, she wasn't able to really voice that on us. And then we were growing up in all white New Jersey. So I had a black family, but I was not getting any black racial socialization really. And I when you said Evansville, I look, I went to grad school. I went to IU Bloomington for 5 years.
Okay.
And let me tell you, my first year, I was going to somewhere, I think it was in Kentucky, somewhere south of Evansville, but we stopped in Evansville to eat.
Uh-huh.
And I'm telling you, this little boy walked into the wall staring at me at that restaurant. He had never seen a black person before in his life. And his mom was like, I'm so sorry. And I'm like cracking up because it's hysterical. But he literally like, walked into the wall with his plate, right? So like you said Evansville. I'm like, yeah, Evansville is very, very not diverse. But I was in parts of New Jersey like this, right? I was telling someone the story yesterday. When I moved to Maryland, the DC area, when I was 19 years old, I was like, my dad had a bowling ball. And I said, what? I thought black people didn't bowl or play
Mhm.
pool because I had never seen a black person at a bowling alley. Now, there were a few black people in my community, so I wasn't like, but not at the bowling hall, not at
Right.
the pool halls. I never saw one. And
Yeah.
then I'm like, my dad has a bowling ball, right? So some similarities in there growing up like that with, very few black people. Most of the friends were white, being told you talk white, you act white, all of that stuff. And so I struggled with my identity as a black woman. So I really resonated with what you talked about. Can you share a little bit more about your story in the book and what you want readers to take away from
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. So, I share in the book. My mom is white. My whole family is white. I didn't grow up knowing my dad, who's black. And I went to a Catholic school, very small town, where I probably am still the only black student that ever went there.
Wow. Okay.
Um, there might have been a few Asian children since then, all adopted by white families, but
Yes, yes.
it's a very white environment. And I really didn't even know any black people until I went to high school. And then it was jarring for me to
Yeah.
get to experience a culture that was so vastly different than the one I grew up in. And I spent a lot of time feeling othered and less than. And also, I think a little bit ashamed that
Yeah.
that I was so different than everyone else.
Hmm.
But, I think this is true. This is probably just who I am as a human being and as a person, in that in every aspect of my life, I make a decision like I'm going to learn how to do this or I'm going to be this, and then I
Hmm.
do that. And I think one of the things that I probably consciously said or unconsciously said to myself is like, I'm going to figure out how to be a part of a Black culture because it's important to me.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
don't think actually it really solidified for me until I became a mom. Because
Mm.
then I've got these two Black kids, and I really didn't want them to ever have the same experiences that I had growing up. And so making sure that they had a strong sense of self and a strong identity became the most important thing to me. And my daughter is, she's 17, and I dedicate the book to her because she's just like a force. And I remember when she was in the second grade at a pretty white school where we knew all the black kids. It was a big school,
Hmm.
but we could count all the black kids probably
Hmm.
on maybe on two hands.
Hmm.
And so she's in this second grade classroom with a wonderful teacher, a wonderful white teacher who's actually my cousin's mother-in-law. So like close to our family, very
Hmm. Hmm.
supportive. I went into the classroom at the very end of the school year for like a party they were having, and I looked up at the wall and they had self-portraits. And I'm like looking for my child. I cannot find my child anywhere. And I finally find her name, and it is a self-portrait drawn of a girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. And I said, absolutely not. We gotta
Mm, mm,
go.
mm,
You can't
mhm,
be at this school anymore
mm,
because
mm, mm,
I could just see how all this was going to play out. And at that point, we moved. We moved to the south side of Evansville so my children could go to a school where more kids looked like them, a more diverse
mhm,
school. We ended up at a Title I school because that's how towns like that work, that,
mhm,
be
mhm,
around people of color, you got to be in an area that is lower socioeconomic status.
mhm,
But, I felt so good about that decision because I really didn't want her to think that who she actually was wasn't worth being up on that wall.
mm,
She had to
mhm,
change herself. So, I think that it's been a journey. And I also think being able to get out of my community, just like you saying the thing about the bowling ball, like that resonated so much with me
mhm.
because moving here to Maryland, but also even just getting to know people like at NACCE conferences, Black women there. And it's like, oh, you like that too? I thought I wasn't like supposed to like that. I thought Black people didn't like that. I've gotten so
Mhm.
into country music lately because it's like, oh, yes, Black people do like country music. And now Black people make country music and I can listen to it and not feel like ashamed.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I think that there's just a lot of opportunity then for me to get out of my kind of bubble and reinvent myself a little bit to say,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
there's not one right way to be a Black person. Like, I get
Mhm.
to be who I am because I'm Black. Like that, I don't have to be any sort of way. Like, I'm a Black person. Like that,
Yeah.
and I can be all of these things. So, I think it's been interesting. It's been some of the experiences that I talk about in the book, with like work experiences were really
Mhm.
jarring for me
Yeah,
when I was
yeah.
younger to, get have this nurse that I worked with talk about how I was like pointing in her face and yelling at her when I was like the most timid 19-year-old you've ever met in your life, that I would have like
Mhm.
died before I yelled at someone. And then, to then have my boss say, well, you talk with your hands a lot. She probably just got confused. Like, really?
Yeah, exactly.
So, I feel at, this side of my life, these things still happen. It's not
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I got to my 40s and the world changed. I moved to a place where it is more diverse, but like still, I still experience the same things.
Mhm.
And I always will.
Yeah.
As long as I'm here in the US, like this is going to be a part of my experience. I've kind of resigned myself to that fact. But, the thing that I can say is that I don't have to, I don't feel the need to like back down and change myself. And for anyone
Mhm.
on any in any space. It's like this is who I am. I think that's one of the lovely things about like your late, midlife. I don't know if the 40s is midlife. I think it probably is.
Getting there. Yeah.
But it's like I actually don't care. It's
Yeah.
fine. You don't
You
have
don't have to
to.
care. Yeah, no, no, I love that. It's funny. I've resisted country music because I already like enough white stuff. And I'm like, I can't go the country route.
You have
Like,
to listen to Shabuzi.
we were we were at the we were at a baseball game at the in Maryland and in Baltimore. My nephew was playing like an all-star game for high schoolers, and they play the same music, and then all of a sudden, my sister's like, "Here's your song," and it was like Bon Jovi, and then another Bon Jovi, then the Def Leppard hit, and I'm like, and I used to be so embarrassed, but now I'm like, whatever. Like it doesn't. I grew up. I'm from New Jersey. If I don't sing Bon Jovi to the top of my lungs, I'm not from New Jersey. I didn't grow up in New
Right.
Jersey, right? And so, but it takes a while to get comfortable with that because you spend so much time being ashamed, right? That you're not like other Black people, that you don't fit in. And I love you tell the story that it was a white kid boy who told you were Black, right? It was a white boy for me who told me. I always ask people to share a first memory of race, and I'm in kindergarten classroom, and I'm minding my business. It must have been around President's Day or whatever. They were like, draw a picture of your favorite president. Minding my business, drawn away. Kid asked, for the brown crayon, and I'm like, I've got it. He looks at my picture. My president is brown. He's like, who's that? I'm like, Thomas Jefferson. 'Cause he was like, why is he Black? And I'm like, why is he not Black? And he's like, we've never had a Black president. We never will. And I was just like, what? And so I remember going home and talking to my mom about it. Again, my mom sent me and she goes, yeah, he's right. I don't know what's wrong with this country because, like, no. She couldn't give me any more information on that because other countries had made progress having women presidents and things like that. And she
Mhm.
knew America hadn't. But as I reflected on that story, I was like, why did I think Tom? And when I learned about who Thomas Jefferson was, I was like, why did I think that guy was black? Because I watched the Jefferson, and George
Oh,
Jefferson was black. So why would 5-year-old me not think Thomas
right,
Jefferson, and I didn't have it in my mind that we didn't have, I didn't understand that none of these presidents could be black. No one ever
right.
told me so until this boy told me, like, I thought Abraham Lincoln sounded black to me too, but like, I started with Jefferson, like, and so it's just funny how you learn these things about yourself and who you're from other people and how
Mhm.
they tell it to you, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then also what you said about having kids. I was the same way. I'm in New York, and it's like, it's not that diverse, right? And mind you, my kids are Afro-Colombian, so they are as dark as me, but they are native Spanish speakers. They had grew up in Colombia their entire lives. So, of course, the kids they're sitting with, they're not sitting with the black kids in the cafeteria. They're sitting with the Latino kids in the cafeteria. And I understand that, right? But then it was Black History Month. I realized their school, and I follow their school on social media, didn't put out a single thing other than the first of the month, Happy Black History Month. I
Yeah.
watched another school district in New York. A little white girl won the Black History Month writing award for second grade. And I'm like, wait, wait, wait. We didn't even do that in this district, not in the element. And that's when I was like, we're going to move because I'm not going to have you. I went to schools like that in New Jersey, and I'm not going to have you going to school like that. But then we ended up moving back to South to Columbia. That's a whole other story. But yeah, it was like you realize you're repeating the same patterns with your own
Mhm.
children, and you just can't do that. You cannot have them. And my kids are like, they have to navigate both worlds. Being Afro Latino is an experience, but they are seen visibly as black first. And so having to get them to understand that is difficult. And even living in a place like Colombia and where we were in the city they're from, lots of Afro-Colombians. People think I'm Afro-Colombian all the time. I love it, but there's still colorism, there's still racism, there's still things that are happening there. And so having to navigate that. But I think, yeah, raising kids in that space makes you really realize if you haven't done your self-work around your own racial identity development, you will when you have kids because you can't keep going on like that, right? And that's some of
Yeah.
the work that we've been doing. So thank you so much for sharing that story with us.
Yeah. No,
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I do think that thinking about how we want the world to be different, either whether it's for our own kids or just children,
Yes,
I spend a lot of time thinking about that. And like I worry, I'm worried about a lot of things right now. And I just think that the more we can just, even when it doesn't feel welcome or comfortable or even safe sometimes, to just like keep talking about these things and keep showing up. I think now is the time to do it more than ever.
yeah,
Because like this too shall pass.
yeah.
We just have to get to the other side.
You're reading my
One
mind.
piece.
I was writing some words. I'm like, despite the attacks, like I'm no, because of the attacks on diversity, equity, inclusion, I'm telling you to double down. This is when you go in, when they're coming at you saying da 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 da. No, because we actually can't. Like, and I know people are scared of that, but I'm like, no, it drives me. It's like, oh, I'm going to do this even more now because you're telling me to shut up about it, and that's the cue. And so, yeah, helping people to see that is super important because the world is a scary place. And yeah, it'll pass. I mean, it just shifted and it came fast for us. 2020, we just saw a huge, yeah, attack on, and lots of progress we've made, right? And it's gonna, but I think, like you said, like with TikTok, things like that, there are ways that our kids can still get this knowledge and information, even if the pushback, and because of the pushback, right? Kids are smart. They don't want the government telling them, what? Don't read that. I'm going to read that. So we have to really step up and support them on that in all ways that we can. And I think sharing these stories from your book. I mean, I haven't taught a college course in a minute. I might be coming back to academia. We'll see. But I would love to have this and have students read this. And I remember I taught, and I hated teaching methods for teaching science. I never taught science. Why am I teaching? But you're a new faculty member. You get stuck teaching a class nobody wants to do. But I remember having students like, all right, I want you to find Women's History Month. I want you to do, find some women scientists of color. I mean, I think one of my students said, I can't find a single Indigenous scientist, man or woman. Like we were looking and like, so it's like getting them to like understand these stories and find them. So I would, this book would be great. And just any of my courses, like let's pick a woman, read about it, tell us about it, what you learned from her, and how her story might, support you and what you're doing. I think it's just really powerful. So that's how I would use the book if I get back into academia. But for now, I'm just going to encourage everyone to read it, learn from the stories yourselves. I love reading Rukia's story. I love her work so much. I can't wait to get out to the Highlander School and visit. I have plans and visions of coming to see you, Rukia, I promise. And some of the other folks that I know, right, and didn't know so much and learned so much about. So thank you so much for sharing their stories. Did anyone have any questions for Alyssa before we wrap up, or a comment if you read the book and you just want to share a comment, that's fine too. You can put it in the chat or you can come off mute and speak directly. I think there's a raise hand function too. You can do that. But yeah, anything else while we're seeing if there's any comments, anything else you want to share with our listeners about this book?
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember when it was about to publish and we'd all done all of this work and there was like this collective like freak out of like, oh my gosh, we are really gonna this is actually gonna be something that people are gonna read. Like people are gonna know so much about me and that's very scary. And I think it was a shared experience amongst all of us of telling these very vulnerable stories. And so I've been grateful at how graciously people have received those stories.
Yes.
That I have shown parts of myself that others haven't seen. I was even thinking as I was sharing the post on Facebook about this, and my
Hmm.
family is all commenting on it. I'm like, oh, don't come. I don't want my family to be a part of it. And now they're all like, you need to bring signed copies of the book when you come back. And I'm like, I don't know if I want you to read
Yeah, I
it.
don't know, right? I know. That's great.
But it
Um,
has been
mhm.
an liberating to
Yeah, yeah.
put so much of yourself out into the world and that the world didn't end when it happened.
Exactly. Because that's what you think. Oh my God, I'm gonna blow up the world. I'm gonna blow up the internet. Yeah, yeah. That's wonderful. Thank you. So we do have a couple questions. Linda says, I've been in awe. Hold on, somebody popped in and went right back. I've been in awe of Alyssa for many years and was so surprised how little I knew about her personal story until I read the book. My question is there a message you would like all women to be able to take from your book? And yes, Margot, that is a great question.
Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Taylor. Like I said,
Mhm.
Dr. Taylor is my dissertation chair, who I took many courses from in my master's program as well. And she tracked me down at a conference one day because we had never met each other in person because I did all online courses. So she has been with me through the adult portion
Oh
of
wow,
my
that's
story.
yeah, that's nice to actually meet the online people in person. Yes.
I think that definitely women as a whole, I think it's really important that women are supporting each other across all of these different lines, like ratio, socioeconomic, all the different places. As much as people of color are under attack, women are also under attack right
Yes,
now,
yes.
and we really need to come together because there's strength in numbers. And so any way that I think women can see each other and hear each other's story and hold each other's stories so that we can show up as a united front. Like that's the only way I think we can push back against some of these like major attacks on women as a whole.
Yes.
And I think for white women in particular who have been sitting in a lot of the seats that others haven't been able to get to. I think there's like a moment that I encourage you to think about who's at the tables you're sitting at, who's missing from the tables you're sitting at. And if the only way for those missing voices to get to the table is for you to stand up, then I would encourage you to stand up sometimes.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, as women, we are still operating in a very patriarchal society. And so there's only so many seats for us most of the time. And so sometimes, in order to get a different viewpoint to the table, we know the men aren't getting up. So sometimes we've got to help each other out.
Yeah, yeah. I like that idea of like, standing behind a woman, letting a woman take your feet and standing behind and giving her space there as well too. And being in this field, I tell people all the time, yes, like I honestly I'm here, I'm the executive director of defending earlier for the past 4 years because of white women who have stepped up
Yep.
and not only made space for me, but put the money where it was needed so I could
Yep.
do this work. But so it was the money and the funding which was important that came from a white woman, but then the white women in the organization had to step back when the
Yep.
white woman with the money said, let her do it. And that was tricky. I didn't know if they could do it, but they did. And they did it in a way that didn't like put me out there to just float on my own and like fail, because that's what they do to you sometimes. They actually supported me. They questioned me, they gave me support, and I really appreciate that looking back now. Because sometimes I felt like, oh, they're just letting me do whatever I want. This is so weird. I don't like. But then I'm like, no, when I had an idea, they ran it through. They asked me all the things. And then that was making sure that I knew what I was doing and I was prepared to answer the tough questions. And so that's the type of, and they told me, we are old white women. We need to step back, right? But they didn't just completely go hands off, because I think sometimes that's done to Black women in leadership positions and you flounder because you
Right.
do need support for this work. You need role models, right? So yeah, I just want to mention that because I think there is a role for white, and I've seen it. I've seen it done well, right? All right, the
There are a
question.
lot of good examples
Yeah,
of that. And I have to call out Margie Carter again as a
yeah,
white
yeah.
woman who has
Hmm.
made a ton of space for Black women to step
Yes,
up
yeah,
and to have their voices heard. So yeah, I think there's
yeah.
great examples
And we
of
should
women.
shout them out. I'm talking about Susan Oxshorn, Nancy Carlson Page,
Mhm.
Diane Levin, Geraldine Bywater, and Blakely Bundy, like really stepping up and allowing me and Keisha Reed and even Keitha Marks to like do our work within the defending the earlier space. And so that is important. All right, the questions are rolling in. I love it. Okay, this is from Margot. Alissa, I just completed my first year in my PhD program. I'm so interested in the history of early childhood care and learning, particularly the way historians have recorded how Black women were a part of developing our profession. How do we move from this book being an add-on to essential foundational knowledge within early childhood care and learning? That is a great question, Margot.
It is. And I think it probably requires more of us to get advanced degrees and those of us with the advanced degrees to actually go back into classrooms. Because, I'm not in one either.
I kept saying I'm at the perfect time. I should go back. And I said I'll open up my own child care home before I go back into public school. No lie, it's the schedule. It's the schedule. But you're right. We need to get back. And I've thought about running some type of child care program so I can get back into the work. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
go ahead. Go
Yeah, no,
ahead.
I think you're doing exactly the thing that needs to be done. You're getting
Yes.
the letters behind your name that are going to
Hmm.
get you to tables and in rooms that unfortunately only those letters can get you in. And then you're going to start putting the books that you want to see read on your syllabus.
Yes.
And I think that's going to just have to happen educator by educator, classroom by
Yep.
classroom. I think if we're waiting for the system to change, we'll wait for the rest of our lives. So we just have
Yeah.
to like make the space where we can.
Yeah, and I would just add bringing the messages to other spaces. Like, I don't know, you're getting a PhD. Like, when I think about conferences, like, okay, let's think about ARA, right? Like, I really struggle getting my stuff in the early childhood space in ARA. I'm not gonna lie, and it's really frustrating because I'm like, I don't know what else I have to do to like
I
get
know a
y'all to.
guy.
Well, okay, I'm starting to know them maybe, but I don't. But there are other spaces that will look at this type of work, right? So, like, recently, I mean, the book was on restorative justice, but my chapter was on early childhood, but we submitted it to critical educators for social justice, right? So when I hear you talking about a book about Black women in history, think about the history SIG.
Hmm.
Think about teaching SIG, right? Teach other groups that are not focused just on early childhood, but
Yeah.
that's on this idea of like history, leadership, development. Look at those spaces because they might also welcome things from other fields as long as it touches on something that they want to do. And don't be afraid to like submit those symposiums and get a group of. I mean, I'm sure you did it after the book came out, had groups of
Hmm.
the women telling their stories, right? Those are the kind of things that we need at conferences so people can read a description and say, oh, wow, a panel on Black history of Black women in early childhood. I'm so coming to that, right? And I think that would be great. All right. Still, I'm gonna mess. Hold on a minute. Sylviencia. I hope I said that right. Sylvienza. Uh,
It's Sylvianka, but I go by Bella.
Sylvianka. Okay. Oh, Bella. Sorry, you wrote it in there too. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sylvianka, but most people call me Bella. I'm a Haitian American early childhood educator based in Chicago, Illinois, with over 10 years of experience working in first to five classrooms. I'm also the founder of EduCore Prep, a developmental decision support system designed to help educators identify participation patterns and strengthen developmental decision making in early childhood settings. Wow, that sounds really interesting. I'm grateful to be part of this conversation and look forward to learning more about Black women in ECE. My question, across the stories shared by the 12 women in this book, were there any common experiences or systemic patterns that surprised you? And what do you believe early childhood leaders and policymakers still misunderstand about the experiences of Black women in the field today? And I just hope that's bringing you to your dissertation because I feel like that might have just led the way. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so first I'm going to start with the thing that surprised me that didn't show up. Because
Mm,
much of my experience really had a white women around me, both elevating and lifting me up most of the time. I'll say it is a primarily positive experience in
Hmm.
early childhood. I expected to hear more of that through the stories, and I did not. The
Hmm.
only other person that mentioned that in her story was Nadia, and
Okay.
Nadia was a student of Louise Derman Sparks. And so that relationship really kind of like helped her to find her voice and find those connections. So that was interesting to me that I didn't see a lot of white women in the other stories in ways that were supportive in the way that you experienced Denisha or the way I
Okay.
experienced.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was surprising to me.
Okay.
I think the other thing that, wasn't surprising, but I was heartened by was just this sense of agency that was relevant in every story, and that you could see it. You could see how people were able to take control of their own experience and make decisions that help them to move through their career. I could definitely get into like all the themes that came out. Family was a huge one that came out as a theme.
Hmm.
Out all of the stories and family support. But I think that the main thing is that while there were a lot of similarities in the story, they were also very different. And I think that is another just thing that's true about any
Hmm.
group of people. We're not a monolith. Black
Yes.
women show up in many different ways, and there's 12 of them right here. There's 100 more, right outside of our door. And just being able to really see concretely how a group of people can have things that are alike, but also be very, very different. That felt like a really important piece of this for me.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah. And I do, the family stories are great. There was a lot of connections there from the ones I read. I saw that as well too. Thank you. I think our last one is more of a comment. Susan from Educators for Peaceful Classrooms and Communities. We enjoyed reading your book in our weekly book group. Your stories brought out our stories as they made connections. We also shared our ahas as we learned from your stories. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Susan, right? Because I think it's really interesting to see what can people who don't, or don't identify with the authors, right? This comes to me when I was teaching at Trinity Washington University in Washington, D.C., and most of my students were first generation DACA recipients. Primarily Latina women. And I'm doing Black Lives Matter at school, and I always do it. And I was like in the question, and I remember like feeling weird. And they were like, "No, you can pose this question." Like we went to school in DC. It was Chocolate City. It's all black. And I was like, "Great, like you can understand, right? It wasn't this. Oh, we don't want to talk about Black Lives Matter at school because we're not black. No, you live in this city, and it's an important thing. So hearing about other people reading the book and having aha moments, that's great, right? Because it resonates, right? But it resonates from a position of I'm learning from Black women, which I think was the goal here, and I think that's what you accomplished.
Yeah, and also like as a white person, I have things in common with Black women. Like I think that's a
Yes,
big part of this
yes,
too, is like people honestly are more alike than they're different. And I don't think
absolutely.
we attend to that very often. Like the differences are important. I don't want to, I want my differences to shine, but I
Yeah,
also know that as human beings, there are things that we all share, and
yes,
that gets
yes.
lost, I think, a lot in 2026.
It does. And I think your book helps bring that back. And even though you don't resonate with some people, you do with others. You're like, oh, yeah, I was just like that, right? And even if you only 1 out of 12, that's a new person that you are now connecting to in the world that you didn't do before. So. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This was a great discussion. Definitely one way to end the book talk series. Yeah, you're right. Tammy says, I feel like early childhood leaders, faculty, and policymakers still don't understand how important early childhood educators are to our nation. No, they don't. I was just talking about that. This work that we do is the foundation of a democracy. You don't have a democracy if you don't take care of children. You don't invest in the people who do take care of their children, take care of children. I'm talking to educators and families, right? We're leaving families out to dry and like making them do this all on their own without enough support, because our society is sick, right? We're not investing in the things we're supposed to be doing. So this conversation is timely and the work is timely. And so thank you, Alissa, so much. Thank you guys all. As you might have heard, Defending the Earlier is coming to a close at the end of this month. You You will be able to access all of our resources on our website, www.dey.org, including this video and others from our series. We've also done lots of other things. We have publications, and so those will still be out. And I did put my contact information in the email for the work that I'm doing. If anybody in the chat, and if anybody wants to share theirs, we'll also make sure that the registrants get that. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a good night.
Thanks. Bye.